Hello, everybody, and welcome to the No Code War Radio podcast. I'm Alex, your host, and this is the second episode of the season 4. After meeting Dominique in my first episode, I'm now heading to my second appointment in London to meet with Veronica, the co-organizer of the No Code Drinks in London, and I'm very excited to see what she has to tell me. Let's go for the episode. Hi, Veronica. Thank you for taking the time to answer my questions for the podcast.
Hi, Alex. So nice meeting you.
It's nice. We're in the streets in London in this very beautiful neighborhood. It's all brand new, right?
Like King's Cross. Well, I don't think it qualifies as brand new.
This part of the it's called Cold Yards, whatever.
Oh, Cold Drops.
Cold Drops, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's nice. I think a few years, 5 years ago.
So so we're going to talk more about no code than London, really. Although I'm curious to see what you like to do here. Can you please introduce yourself just to start?
Yeah, I'm Veronica. I'm originally Italian, but I would say I'm a citizen of the world. I've lived in the US for more than 12 years. And I moved to London about 2 years ago. I'm a no-code professional, software creator. I run my own agency. But yeah, I worked for small companies, big companies. I guess I'm a little bit of a generalist. But I definitely consider myself a product developer, product designer. That's the way I would define myself.
Okay. What's your background? I'm always curious to ask because in the no-code space,
I have a weird one. I have a good answer to that. I am a lawyer.
Okay, that's a pretty unusual one indeed.
Yes, I trained as a lawyer in Italy, and I practiced law for 3 years in M&A, actually. So I write my own contracts, but I would say that's pretty much I've left that mindset completely. I would say what I do now is the opposite of lawyering. It's a lot of risk taking and a lot of doing that. So yeah, my background is law, and then I switched to marketing. I was able to switch career pretty effectively, and then I worked in marketing in tech. So I learned a lot about digital products just by working for companies that built software.
Did you move to the US to work in marketing, or was the opposite around?
I moved to the US to switch career. I decided I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. This is it. And I moved to Philadelphia. I studied a master in business there, and it was 2011, so a while ago, more than 10 years ago, and it was when the startup scene was kind of really up and coming, especially in New York. And I got hired at a legal tech startup in New York. That was my first job in software. And
was there a link with your lawyer background?
Yes.
Or not?
Yeah, those were the only people who were crazy enough to hire me. Because I was an Italian lawyer. It's a good story though, I think, because it goes back to a little bit of no code, because I met these guys at a hackathon. It was the TechCrunch hackathon, and kind of the people who ended up hiring me won the hackathon. And TechCrunch hackathon is a big deal. It's one of the biggest hackathons in the United States. And at the time, I think it was like 200, 300 attendees paid. And as you got to present in the big stage, and the prize was seed investment from first round capital, which is pretty major seed fund. And this is what they did. And I was their first employee.
Nice.
And it was fun. And I went to a hackathon this year after, I think, 6 years since I've been to a hackathon. But this is how I got into tech, and I kind of never left.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I've always dreamed of. I did a lot of hackathon at the beginning of my career, and I've always dreamed of doing the TechCrunch one. For me, it's kind of the equivalent of the Boston Marathon. For tech, it's like this is like one of with the main stage and like this whole work. We never had anything equivalent in France, I think.
Yeah, TechCrunch is big. It was a whole production, and I don't know. I think they still do it, but I think it changed quite a bit, and it became more like a pitch stage. At that time, it was still very rough, where you would sleep there, and honestly, I think a lot of devs really took it seriously. Some people came with an idea, but you didn't came with pre-work. And now if you go to hackathon, a lot of people are like okay, they already did half the job.
It has changed a lot. And I think COVID, for me, already before COVID, the hackathon scene was not the same, but then COVID just nailed it. Now it's like, now you have online hackathons, things like that. I think for me, it doesn't make sense. But I miss like this kind of competitive era.
I mean, it's really about like no pressure, right? You're supposed to build something.
Yeah.
And I think no code is great. If anything, I hope to see like more no code hackathons. I think, maybe Bubble organized one. I don't remember, but I think no code is perfect because you can do something very quickly.
Definitely.
So yeah, sorry, we got lost in the rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, it's that's what happens. So tell me, how did you encounter like those no code tools for the first time? And which one? How did you get into this?
So when you work in a small company, like, we were like 3, and of course I work with 2 engineers, you end up doing a little bit of everything. And the first thing I wanted to do was like, oh guys, I'm going to learn to code, because then I can, be helpful, and I can manage the website. At the time, there was no website builder. Our website was, I think, a bunch of JavaScript, and it was I don't even remember what our website framework was. And people were like, my co-founders were like, I don't think it's the best idea. I mean, we hired you because you could do everything else. We are the ones who can code. They went to the best in engineering school in Canada, and they were like, actually, learning to code is a terrible idea. You shouldn't do it. And I'm like, oh. Okay, this was the era where General Assembly was there, and all the bootcamp of learning the code were really popular. So I was like really into thinking I could learn how to code.
Yeah, I mean, there was this whole
And in the end, they were right. It was a terrible idea. I mean, I thought it myself a little bit of HTML, and so I knew what I was doing, and I could use GitHub, and I learned kind of those how developer push things live. But I never learned how to code, and it was the right call. And I think, in retrospect, it was the good thing to do.
Okay.
And then 10 years later, all of a sudden I realized, these tools like Webflow or Airtable or even Zapier didn't exist in 2011 when the only thing to build a website was to learn how to code. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, I'm glad I didn't learn, because I don't need to learn anymore. I can learn these tools instead. And I'm just going to do things myself. And this was kind of like a big thing. In marketing, you feel crippled because you have to ask developers to do things, especially when, you deal with software. And then I felt, liberated. I'm like, finally, I had to wait 10 years, but, I can now do my own things, and I don't need to ask a developer. So this is kind of how I
It's very efficient because developers don't really want to do marketing websites also, I think. They're more interested, and they have more value doing, like, building the products, doing the back end, like the handover between like you and them. I think it's always like a waste of...
I think developers, depends who you ask, but, there's, as everything, even in marketing, there's interesting work and then there's boring work.
Depends.
And for them, I don't think any developers like to do what they call boilerplate code. And I think even front end is not super popular with back-end developers and vice versa. Yes, agreed. So I think there was definitely new generation of no code, like pure no code tools, where they were complete visual development with results that were really good. Like, when I was in New York, Squarespace was there. It was a young company, but it was there. You could do your portfolio or your little shop in Squarespace, but it wasn't very powerful.
Yeah.
Versus, from 2019, I think things changed, and all of a sudden you could do a lot of things with no code. You could even do mobile apps with no code.
Sure. Okay, and so how did you make the switch to become a professional into this and work, as a freelancer or as your agency? What was the...
Yeah, it was a little bit of a kind of lifestyle decision for me. I had worked in tech at that time, kind of flash forward. Like, I worked with this tiny startup in 2011. And then, that startup could raise a Series A. So I was effectively lost my job, but I was able to find work for another startup. That other startup went really well, and I got acquired. And then we got acquired by a bigger company. And then all of a sudden, I worked for this giant company called Verizon. You might have heard of. Helicopter here. This is for you, Alex, for editing background. and my last company was Amazon. So I worked for a really big giant of the internet.
So you've done it all. I mean, the small startups with two founders and
I felt like I've done it all, and I got my green card at the time, and I was like, you know what? I want to pause and think what I want to do. It was actually a really good moment to raise capital, so I considered doing my own thing.
Yeah.
And so I kind of quit my job. I was like, I'm quitting my job. I'm going to teach myself some no-code platforms, and I'll decide what to do. I was kind of in complete exploration mode. And then I don't even know how it happened, but it was a mix of I couldn't find an idea that I really loved for myself. And at the same time, people were asking, oh, well, you could do this for me. You could do this for me. And I love talking to people and solving problems and creating things. So I started doing a couple of client projects, and it was a landslide from there. I did a little bit of work for Webflow only agency called 8020. They are based in Canada. And then I kind of started my own.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting. You will have to listen to the episode I just recorded before we met. Because it's kind of the opposite, where Dominic has all these ways of generating ideas and he's doing tons of side projects. It's quite interesting. But like you have so many paths, and so many ways to use those tools. And I think it's very interesting to use those tools for clients and for work.
Absolutely, you can do a lot. And then people ask me, what are your type of clients? And some people are surprised that a lot of my clients are actually pretty big.
Yeah.
They have engineering teams, but sometimes I tell people I work with big companies, and you never have enough engineers, no matter how big you are. You never have enough development speed. So I think it's very common for companies to decide to outsource like the easiest stuff, the boilerplate stuff, to others.
Okay.
So sadly, this helicopter is just hovering over us.
Yeah, it's staying, but it's okay. It's not. It's not going to be too bad for the. There is so many very efficient now noise removing stuff. So
completely.
So we should be good. But yeah, it's weird. I don't know why it's staying here. Okay. How do you find your clients? Just out of curiosity.
I mean,
if you have any tips for people,
as everyone would tell, that's agencies or client work in general. It's a referral business.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's a lot of word of mouth, and especially the work that I do, I do very consultative work. So it's not like marketing agency that just you have very clear projects and you do a lot of projects at the same time. If I cannot take more than 2 or 3 projects at the same time, it's product work, right? So you want attention, and so it's very, very word of mouth, and it's a lot of the people that I know in my network or people who work with me that are referring me.
Okay.
I am a Webflow certified expert, so I get some leads from there for web building, and in particular, my background is in marketing, so website building is as a strength. But I would say it's just doing good work, and this is what I say to everyone: just make sure that you do good client work, and eventually people will come to you. You could productize your service and trying to do more aggressive paid acquisition, but I don't recommend this until you have a niche and you can be very predictable.
Would you like to grow your agency, or
no?
Stay?
No, I don't think my future is scaling. I think where I am at this point, I have a purpose. Kind of my specialty is actually not choosing a platform. So a lot of the work I do is not to pick a tool, but kind of listen to the client and say, well, actually, this is the best no-code architecture for you. Or maybe it's even a coded architecture, it's a low-code, or it's a mix.
Okay.
So a lot of my core is not specializing in a no-code tool. I'm a generalist in all. But I'm considering doing some true products. So, for example, now that I've done kind of quite a few Webflow projects, we're developing a little Webflow app, or Webflow agencies that develop Bubble plugin. Yeah. It's a little bit the same concept. Okay. So you find little snippets of code that complete the platforms, and those I think are interesting kind of side income, or just useful things to put into the marketplace.
And you were mentioning before we started recording also maybe doing like Notion templates or...
Oh, yes. That's a complete side project.
Okay.
So I'm terrible at side project, by the way. Like, I only can do one good thing at a time.
I think it's hard to... Wouldn't you say it's hard to be a good freelancer? I think it's hard to be a good freelancer and good at side projects because it's two like very opposite things.
I think so too.
Freelancer agency, I mean, but...
You have a good point. I think it depends a little bit of your personality.
Like, service versus product.
I know many people, especially here in London. I'm part of this club. It's called Ramen Club, and it's bootstrappers. A lot of them are developers with full-time job, and they have a discipline that I absolutely envy. They can just work on their 9 to 5 and then work on their side projects, even multiple ones on the weekend or once a day. I am not like that. I just lack the focus. So I'm more like I only can do 1 or 2 things at a time. So that's why my side project is in the summer. But yeah, back to your question. I'm a big Notion user. I run my business on Notion. I've also done some small consulting, like setting up, more advanced Notion system for other people. And I think now that Notion has launched a template marketplace, I think it's interesting to put out something so people can see what you could do with Notion and kind of do something more than habit tracker and even start to use Notion to see how you can guide development and have. We talked a little bit before about opinionated software. Mm-hmm. Notion is like this huge canvas, but you can use Notion to push opinionated project management approaches to your team. For example, you can create a linear. I don't know if you're familiar with linear. It's like a Jira clone. So you create issues and you track issues. I created a Jira clone in Notion. Not because linear linear Jira clone in Notion. Not because they're not bad software, but they have an approach of structuring things that is very familiar to people. So it's a little bit of a mix. So you use Notion almost like a drawing tool to build something that companies have spent years designing, and you just build it in Notion. So that's what I did, and I use it for myself. And I think it could be interesting to put it out there and see what people do with it.
I think it's interesting because I think a lot of people miss on the templates. They miss the fact that the templates, what can be interesting is the content they provide, not just the technical things that you're going to click on a button, it's going to do something. But, you can, there is many different methodology of project management, for instance.
Absolutely.
And you can have a template or, hiring, for instance, you have the A level, methodology, A players. Do you know this one?
I don't know this one, no.
It's like a recruiting, a framework kind of thing. And so you can have a template. But it's not like the template really, it's like the methodology that's, it helps you, so you don't have to read the book, you can have the template and the template is going to explain and help you to implement the methodology, That's what I find interesting sometimes in the content of the templates. It's, not just the fact that you replicate, but it's
I think you have a good point. Kind of stepping back a little, what made a tool like Notion very powerful was that you didn't have to learn a new software. It felt freeform enough that you could start doing something right away without reading anything. Versus if you work for a company and they're like, oh, we're using Salesforce, you're gonna take 2 weeks, 1 week to just figure out where stuff is in Salesforce, period. And the second week to figure out how your company implemented Salesforce, because that could be a whole new thing. And Notion just felt so effortless in comparison. Of course, the counterpoint is that it's not opinionated, so it could be a mess. So if you give Notion to your company time, a month, and you get random docs everywhere.
You need methodology to go with, and
I think there's a good compromise there, right? And so the templates are interesting. And for Webflow, for example, now I've done my fair share of Webflow project, and I feel I have a methodology. So that's something that I can put it out there, and other Webflow freelancer agencies can benefit from. Okay, this is how you structure a project. This is the things you need to check before you launch a Webflow project.
I think it's. I'm very enthusiastic about the development of those methodology. What you're saying, because a lot of those tools, they can be used in many different ways, and the more powerful they are, Webflow is super powerful, Bubble is very powerful. but it's very easy to use them in a very bad way. And I think those tools don't really make a good job at, but maybe it's not their job actually to suggest how to use them. They just give it to you, and so now it's the opportunity, and more people are doing it, like the client first methodology from FinSuite and this kind of thing. And I think there are more and more. I heard like now there is like several kind of competitors of client first. And I think it's great, because that's what we need. Like those tools are powerful, but it's even more powerful if you use them properly, or properly in a way, according to a way of using it.
I think you're spot on. I used to, people ask me, what is no code? And I used to say, no code is not a what, it's a how, right? So it's how you create a product. It's not the product. So the product can be horrible. It can be designed horribly, and then it could be developed horribly with no code as well with code. Like it can be a mess regardless. And I think what you're saying is that there is a knowledge and frameworks that help you create good products, good digital products, regardless of what you use, Webflow, Airtable, software, whatever.
The more open is the tool, the more you need those, I guess.
Yes, there are best practice in developing products that are just universal. And it doesn't matter what tool you use, you want to have that sanity in your process.
And especially, I would say also with collaboration. If you were several people, I don't know if you have this context of working on a Webflow project with other designers.
Absolutely. No, it is a project. One of the big philosophy of my agency is that we build it without developers, and we build it in a way that you can work on it without us. Okay. So I don't do retainers. I mean, some people ask for it anyway, but as a philosophy, I didn't like it. And the reason why I didn't like it is that I was the client and I hated it. I had an agency retainer and I felt like they just build the max of retainer anyway. This is stupid. We're not going to do this. So as a client, I hated them. So as a provider, I'm like, we're not doing retainer. I do a training session, even multiple ones at the end of the project, where I explain how kind of it's like you buy a car and they tell you how the car works, what's inside the hood. And so it's very important you build it in a clean way. So someone that opens the car sees, okay, this is how they built this and this is how things are. So we give plenty of documentation to clients. And I was shocked when I learned that a lot of freelancer agencies don't do any of that. Like I got people asking me, I have this bubble app built by an agency and I don't know how it works. I'm like, well, they didn't give you like anything? They didn't give you a doc? Or how they did? No. There was no handoff. It was like, this is the app. Good luck.
No, it's a very interesting, and I truly believe in what you're saying, because for me, this is the philosophy of no code. It's like, giving the chance to autonomy, like the people have the autonomy, like the clients, and not the old way of doing the agency where you want to change a letter on your website is going to cost you, like 500 euros. But I'd be curious to hear your experience of, I'm going to say it easily, like, aren't your clients breaking everything straight away as soon as you're... It's a bit, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I'm just...
It's a good question. So I think we can answer that question in different ways according to which platforms. So, for example, when I mentioned that, a lot of my work is helping clients pick the right platform. This is one of the things I ask when we do the scoping to figure out which platform to pick. Who is going to own your product? And according to the answer, I would recommend a tool over another, because some tools are done in a way where everyone is God. You can break things very, very easily. Some tools have developed, and this is kind of more like mature no-code tools, have developed a system of permissions. And those system of permissions, if you have a lot of people working on your app or on your website, are very helpful, because that is how you avoid clients breaking things.
You give them a level of permission that is going to be according
to So it's a little bit of who's going to work on it, how often you're going to work on things, and how often you're going to change things. So a lot of it that we try to avoid is like people breaking things by building repeatable components. So and teaching clients how to use that component in a way that's safe. So Webflow is famous. You change a class and you break everything and look like that in the website. So we stopped doing that. We use components, and we tell clients to drag and drop the components and use like a little variant or not, or trying to find ways for them to do what they need to do without changing classes. And this means doing a lot of advanced things like CMS. Like, we did a website, we just launched it, and it's like everything is inside the CMS because so the client doesn't have to click on the designer. They can do everything from the editor, and they don't need to change things.
No, it's great. I think is it an effort? Would you say that you're because I guess some agencies are just lazy to do what you're saying. Because I think it's great that you're doing that and you give the chance to your clients to do that, but
it is an effort, and it's definitely the difference of
do you make
building something custom and going with the templates. I mean, a lot of templates are great, but then the moment you touch them, things start to fall apart because the easy thing is to just create static pages and just duplicate those. It's definitely an effort, but I'm very upfront of that. Like, I think there's like a moment where the client needs to realize, especially B2B, like your website is your window. It's like how people experience it, and you want to invest that money up front to have a good system. If you're not ready to invest that money, that's fine. But that's the flip side. You're gonna pick a template and then you're on your own, or you're just gonna hire a freelancer and hoping it doesn't become spaghetti code. And I think Airtable and even other systems are the same. Usually these companies, in my experience, they have a hero inside the company that developed this mega spreadsheet or Airtable base with some Zap attached to it, of course, completely undocumented. And then this person leaves the company or just the system starts to break. And this is where actually kind of like I come in, and my agency is Elder Studio. So a lot of what we do is kind of pick things that are MVPs and take it to kind of what I call Vespa level. Like, you have a skateboard, you built it yourself, great. And now, it needs to be structured. So a lot of what we do is kind of take Airtable and transform it into software. Because software you can't break. It becomes an interface.
Sure.
And that your client or your internal employees can use.
You seclude the...
Yeah, and to be fair to Airtable, I think they did a lot of things with permissions. But, you have to be ready of training all your company in Airtable. If everyone is going to touch that thing, you want to limit that. And then they created the interfaces, they created the form, which I think are very smart things. But sometimes it's time maybe to go to Bubble, right? I think that's a classic. Bubble is a classic kind of, more developed systems. But you could totally, maybe, there's Airtable can take you very far, but at some point to avoid the breakage, you need to mature.
But I agree. I think they still have a way to go to get to the permission levels that really gives you the granularity to have people do just what they need to do in your... The interface is already a good step, but it's a bit like
it could be even a legal requirement. Like for example, if you have if you're running your healthcare company and you're putting patient data somewhere, you need what technically is called row level permission. So I have this patient, and the data of this patient can be accessed only by your doctor, and this nurse, and all the other nurses and all the other doctors cannot access this data. And this is something that not a lot of tools allow, and it's a classic, constraint of healthcare apps that made it very hard for no code to get there, because simply there was no way to do row level permission. For example, in Airtable, there's no way to do it today. So sometimes you have to kind of screen this, or even to avoid stupid mistakes, like you build a client portal and all of a sudden your clients look at things that they shouldn't be looking at. But yeah, that's permissioning is super, super important for kind of mature or more enterprise level no code apps.
Yeah, it comes, I think, pretty quickly. But it's great that you're talking about that, because I think a lot of more beginner no-coders in the community miss on this. They don't really understand this, the importance of even just like this notion of permissions in general. And because there's been a lot of problems, I don't know if you followed, because since Airtable, for instance, doesn't allow you to do these really permission levels very well, some people have been using Softer or Stacker on top of Airtable. But then then people realize that those tools actually what they're doing is not they don't do raw level permission. They just hide some stuff. But then the data is actually there and all these kind of things. I mean, we're getting a bit technical there, but there is a level of attention. I think that's important to...
Yeah, this is kind of the devil is in the details. So I'll give you another example for another different tool where it's exactly the same thing. Like people think the logic is removing what you shouldn't see versus the logic is just hiding it. It's Webflow with lists. Webflow has few limitations that you can go around with plugins and code. For example, like with filters, right? Webflow doesn't do dynamic filters, so there's a lot of ways to do dynamic filters, hide it. Well, hide it. They're not disappearing. So that means that if you have like 200 items, you might be okay with it. But if you have 2,000, I mean, the page is still loading them all, even if you're only looking at 20. And that means that it's super heavy. And then your client is going to be like, oh, well, I implemented this filter, but the page is super slow. And we're like, because it's loading 2,000. So that's a lot of the work.
Yeah, it's both like a performance and a security issue at the same time, I would say.
Absolutely. But these are, to some extent, are good problems to have, right? These are like where no-code has some limits and people are building around those limits, which I think is great. This is kind of the devils in the details that you start to dig into when you build client projects or even in your own projects.
No, it's super interesting. I mean, we could talk a lot of time about that. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the London scene, or even in the UK. I don't know how much. Like you can tell me the contacts you've made here. You're co-organizer of the no-code drinks that have been happening here. What can you tell me about?
It's a great question because I'm new to London. I moved like a little less than 2 years ago. And of course, I had my kind of tech and no-code scene in the Bay Area. And here I was like, I need to find my people. And I found them. I think, the no-code drinks was a way for us to, get together in a very, I would say, like casual way. I must say, like it's less people in no code here in London than, of course, a big place like the US, but they are super talented. Lots of people who are not just amateurs but really professionals. Lots of bubblers, extremely good Webflow talent. Usually, this is Webflow talent that comes from agency, so people who already know very well how to build websites. And decided that, Webflow is actually a very efficient way to build a website, better than WordPress. So a lot of agencies that kind of have like developer background and are picking up Webflow, which I think are very interesting people to talk to because they have great design talent. And London in general is great city for designers, and so when it comes about UI and design, lots of exploration activities and things like that.
I think in Europe, London has always been one of the most, I would say, like interesting city for the startup scene. But I feel like maybe the Brexit and the COVID also kind of shook things down.
Yeah, I moved here at the end of COVID, and I asked, where do I go? And people were like, oh, everything died down.
That's a shame.
I was very, very disappointed. But I would say like things are coming up. And another thing I would recommend for no-coders to come to London, go to the Indie London, which is the kind of the indie hacker crew here in London, the bootstrappers.
Dominic mentioned it.
Absolutely. I think Indie Beers is an event that Indie London organizes every month or so, and it's super popular. There's like hundreds of people and lots of no-coders there, and great people in general. Just fun to be around.
Yeah, I like the indie community in general.
And Webflow is picking up. I mean, they're doing the live conference here this year, and we have with the Webflow, some other Webflow people, we do meetups and some workshops.
Okay.
It's nothing like super formal, but there is a Webflow meetup, I would say, every quarter or so.
Okay, cool.
I've been telling the bubble people to do stuff. I mean, but...
Yeah, that will happen. But, it's very interesting. Last question, and it's not related to no-code, but I'm just curious to know, what do you like to do? I mean, what would you recommend to do in London for someone who visits? but that you like not like go see the Tower Bridge or something, but like what do you think is you like special to do?
Well, where we are, I think it's a great area that gets overlooked. I think a lot of people with kids have to get to King's Cross because there's platform 9 for Harry Potter.
It's true. Yeah.
And if you just walk like 10 minutes, there is this great, Collier place where they stream Wimbledon, and the summer with the canal is so nice. So I definitely recommend coming to King's Cross and this kind of more modern area. Personally, I just moved to North London. And I love it. I mean, I'm next to a big park called Hampstead Heath, which is not part of the Royal Park. So people go to Hyde Park, Regent's Park. And this is kind of a little off the beaten track. I recommend making a trip to Hampstead. It's fantastic. It's a beautiful park. You can go have a picnic, and it's just super chill. Then you see British people jumping in super murky ponds, and you're horrified if you.
Oh, really?
But they love it. They are having the time of their lives, and it's just a very chill vibe. It reminds me of California, actually. So I feel a little bit home.
All right, perfect. I'm actually staying there from Saturday. I mean, near Belsize Park. So
exactly.
I will go have a look.
I think it's a wonderful area of London that gets a little overlooked. But if you like nature and you have a few non-rainy days, definitely
That's the problem. That's
try to make the trip.
Hopefully it will be nice. Perfect. Thank you so much for all this. Super interesting. Where people can follow you or get in touch?
I'm on Twitter. It's still called Twitter.
I don't think it's still called Twitter, but I don't know why it's called X.
I'm calling it Twitter. Definitely. My username is UberVero. So UberVero.
Right.
Yeah, whatever.
I will share the links in the notes.
Yes, and then of course my agency is Eldur Studio, and I try to put all my side projects there. So just go to eldur.studio. Super easy. And you can find me there, and LinkedIn too. Like, happy to connect with anybody.
How did you choose the name of your studio? For me, it sounds very Lord of the Ring, but I don't know if there's.
It is a little Lord of the Ring because it's an Icelandic word. I have a psychological attachment to Iceland for other reason that we're not going to touch here. Eldur means fire in Icelandic, and my last name in Italian means fire lighter. It's funny. Yeah, I got a lot of jokes as a kid, and so I was like, it was a way to kind of give something that was mine too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Super nice talking to you, Alex.
What a very interesting conversation again. It was a little bit disturbed by this chopper that was over us for part of it. I hope it didn't disturb you too much, but I really enjoyed it. It was really interesting. And I found it great that right after talking with Dominic, who is an indie maker, very creative, has a lot of side project ideas, Veronica was really on the other side of the spectrum in the no-code world. She's really all about making an agency, providing services for her clients, bringing expertise, and really focusing on her clients' project. So that was great. I'm already just in my first 2 interviews, several aspects of the activities of the no-coders. Well, now I'm going to walk around a little bit in this interesting part of London that is King's Cross, and I'm going to get ready for my next interview. That's going to happen in a few days, so I have a little bit of time to enjoy London. As I've said before, I've lived in London for a few years, and it's a city I really like. I know it quite well. I especially like East London. If you're around, you should definitely check it out. It's changing a lot. That's what I enjoy. I lived there about 12 years ago. And I used to come every year. I took a little break during the pandemic. I don't know, actually, maybe we're still in the pandemic, but that doesn't really matter. So now we can travel. So I really want to come back. I'm already planning maybe on coming back actually for the Webflow Conf. And I really, also because now I'm meeting some people and I think Veronica is going to be there. So that might be interesting. But yeah, so I like every time I come back, I really like to see how the city is changing. And one of the things I'm quite fascinated with London is that they manage to make new construction, new buildings, very modern, and also keep the old a little bit of the soul of the districts and the areas. And for instance, near King's Cross, there is like this coal drops yard is quite interesting. You can see all those former gas tanks. I guess they are. I mean, it's very graphic and visual. So I'm not gonna probably talk well about it in the podcast. But you should really check it out. And it's interesting because when I was living in London, I had already seen some of those gas storage facilities, which are massive metallic structures. And that was the first time near in this coal drops yard that I could see that they were turned into housing. So that was quite interesting, and I found that to be a clever integration of the story of the area. They could have simply destroyed them, I guess, but that would be quite a waste, and it keeps like the memory. And there's a lot of examples of that all around London. So I really strongly encourage if you go for a visit to go discover different areas and walk around, not just in the touristic districts, but also around, and you will see that there is tons going on. The only downside of that is that there's also a lot of cranes and a lot of construction sites all over. But yeah, it's the same in Paris to be fair. So that happens, and cities have to develop but it's really, I really like how it's done in London. Anyways, just wanted to tell you a little bit about that feeling, and I will see you in the next episode for my next interview.